A 7-year-old dead girl was about to be taken for autopsy. But the doctor saw a strange mark on her belly that made him lose his mind and call the police. A 7-year-old girl lay beneath a white sheet in the basement of Willowbrook Medical Examiner's office. Her tiny frame barely raised the fabric, and yet the silence around her felt heavier than anything the room had ever held. The fluorescent lights above buzzed with a faint hum, flickering in a rhythm that only deepened the strangeness of the morning. The air was cold, tinged with disinfectant, steel, and the faint metallic trace of blood that never seemed to wash away no matter how many times the walls were scrubbed. Dr. Michael Hale adjusted his glasses as he walked through the long corridor, the sound of his shoes echoing against the tile. He had worked as a forensic pathologist for nearly 20 years, and he had seen everything: murders, car accidents, tragedies that stripped away any illusion that life was fair. But as he reached for the clipboard left on the counter outside the autopsy room, something unsettled him. It was not written in the files, nor in the sterile report stapled at the top. It was in his chest, pressing down in a way he could not explain. The paperwork was brief, disturbingly so. Unidentified female, approximately 7 years old. Body recovered near Lake Hartwell, no witnesses, no identification. That was all. No injuries noted, no evidence of drowning, no visible wounds. A girl simply found lifeless on the banks of a lake at dawn. He ran his hand slowly across his jaw, feeling the stubble he had not shaved that morning. His fingers trembled slightly, though he forced himself to ignore it. He pushed open the steel door, and the smell of cold metal and formaldehyde filled his lungs. The stretcher had been wheeled in earlier by 2 attendants who avoided eye contact as they left the room. They always did with children. Dr. Hale stood there for a moment, staring at the small outline beneath the sheet. The shape was wrong in a place like this. It belonged to a bed, a playground, the arms of a parent, but not here. With deliberate care, he pulled the sheet back just enough to see her face. Her hair was tangled and damp, strands of chestnut brown plastered against her pale forehead. Her lips were parted slightly, as if she might exhale at any moment. Dirt clung beneath her fingernails, and faint smudges of mud streaked her cheeks. There were no bruises, no cuts, no evidence of harm. She looked, impossibly, like a sleeping child. Dr. Hale let out a long breath, fogging the lenses of his glasses before removing them. His eyes stayed on her small features, unwilling to look away. He whispered, almost to himself, "Who are you, little one?" The clock above the counter ticked slowly. He turned toward the sink, washed his hands, and prepared the instruments with a practiced calm. Each scalpel, each clamp, each tray was arranged with clinical precision, but his movements were slower than usual. He paused before slipping on the latex gloves, as if giving himself one last moment to hesitate. He had performed thousands of autopsies, but this felt wrong. Something in his gut urged him to stop, yet he moved forward because that was his duty. Answers had to be found, and sometimes the truth was hidden beneath the skin. He pulled the sheet lower, revealing her torso. The hospital gown she had been dressed in crinkled faintly under his hands. He adjusted her position gently, his fingers brushing her arm, and then he froze. The skin beneath his glove was warm. Not faintly warm, not the residual temperature of a body recently delivered, but warm, alive, impossible. His brows furrowed. He pressed his hand more firmly against her forearm, and a chill rushed through him. This was not normal. A body left for hours after being declared deceased should have been cold, stiff, unyielding. But this child's skin gave beneath his touch. "No," he muttered under his breath. He removed his glove with shaking hands and placed his bare palm against her neck. At first, there was nothing, no steady pulse to reassure him, no obvious beat, yet the warmth was undeniable. He reached for the digital thermometer on the counter, slid it beneath her arm, and waited. The seconds stretched. The small screen blinked to life. 98.2 degrees. He dropped the thermometer, the clatter echoing across the steel table. His breath caught in his throat. This was impossible. The report claimed she had been dead for over 6 hours. A body did not retain such warmth without life inside it. He swallowed hard, his throat dry, his heartbeat racing in a way it had not since his residency years ago when mistakes could still ruin him. Michael bent low, pressing his ear near the child's lips. For a moment, all he heard was the electric hum of the ceiling lights. Then, a sound, barely audible, the faintest trace of air brushing past her lips, so soft it could have been mistaken for H. His imagination. He pulled back, eyes wide, his pulse thundering. He whispered again, louder this time, "No, oh God, no." The scalpel in his other hand slipped from his grasp, striking the tile floor with a metallic crack. His legs locked. His mind screamed at him to act, but disbelief pinned him in place. Then, without warning, the girl's chest rose, just slightly, just enough. A shallow breath rattled from her throat. Michael stumbled backward, knocking over a tray of instruments. The crash jolted him out of his paralysis. He darted forward again, his hands trembling as he pressed against her small ribcage. There, faint, erratic but real, a heartbeat. His throat tightened, his eyes burned. He had been seconds away from cutting into a living child. With trembling hands, he grabbed the intercom and shouted, "Emergency!" Code blue in the autopsy suite. "I need a crash team now." The static hissed back at him, but he did not wait. He pressed both hands over the shallow incision he had barely begun, trying to stem the trickle of blood. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered over and over, "I am sorry, forgive me, please hold on." The doors burst open, nurses and technicians flooding in, their faces shifting from confusion to shock as they saw the child moving weakly beneath the sheet. "She's alive," Michael cried hoarsely. "Get a stretcher now." The room became chaos, gloved hands moving, machines wheeled in, monitors hooked up with desperate speed. Yet through it all, Michael never released his hold on her tiny frame. Her eyelids fluttered faintly, though they never fully opened. Her lips parted again, releasing a fragile sigh that sounded like a plea for help. And then, as one nurse lifted the fabric of her gown to attach leads, Michael saw it. Just below her navel, faint but distinct, a mark, circular, almost like a brand. A shape pressed into the skin that should not have been there. His eyes locked on it, his body frozen again, though this time with horror. He recognized the symbol. He had seen it once before, years ago, in a file he had been told to never speak of again. He whispered, almost choking on the words, "No, this cannot be real." The girl gave another weak breath, and in that moment Michael knew this was no ordinary mistake. This was not merely a misdiagnosis. Something far darker was etched into her very skin. And before he could stop himself, he reached for the phone and dialed the police. The line clicked, and the dispatcher's voice came through the receiver. "Willowbrook Police Department, what is your emergency?" Dr. Hale's voice trembled, his throat dry. "This is Dr. Michael Hale, medical examiner. I need officers at the county morgue immediately." He looked down at the girl as her chest rose faintly again, the mark glowing paler under the harsh fluorescent light. "I discovered something that changes everything." He did not elaborate, he could not. The words refused to leave his mouth. The dispatcher's tone shifted from routine to concerned. "Doctor, are you in immediate danger?" Michael's grip on the phone tightened. He looked at the faint mark again, that perfectly round impression like it had been branded deep beneath the skin. "Just send them, please." By the time he hung up, the nurses had wheeled the girl into the emergency suite down the hall. He followed in a daze, his gloved hands stained with her blood, his mind spinning with fragments of memory. That symbol. The last time he saw it, he was still a young resident at St. Luke S. It was carved into the skin of a boy no one claimed, a boy whose file was sealed under federal request. Michael had never been given answers, only warnings to stay quiet. Now, a decade later, it had appeared again on a girl who had supposedly been dead. The hallway was chaos. Nurses barked orders, pushing the stretcher through swinging double doors into Trauma Bay 2. Monitors beeped, oxygen hissed, and the steady rhythm of hurried footsteps beat like a second heart. "Pulse is weak but present," one nurse reported. "Pressure dropping," shouted another. Michael pressed his hands against the doorway, frozen, watching as the team descended on her tiny body. Electrodes stuck to her chest. A mask covered her face. IV lines snaked into her fragile arms. The girl looked impossibly small under all the equipment. "Who brought her in like this?" barked Dr. Alvarez, the ER attending on shift. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on Michael. Michael swallowed hard. "The police declared her deceased. They delivered her body to me for autopsy." A silence cut through the chaos for a single second. Alvarez's eyes narrowed, and she started breathing on your table. Michael's voice cracked. Yes. Another round of chaos erupted, alarms blaring as her heart rate dipped dangerously low. Nurses scrambled to stabilize her, pumping medication through the IV, adjusting the oxygen mask, shouting numbers that blurred together and Michael's ears. He could not look away from her belly. The sheet had slipped during the rush, and the mark gleamed faintly under the bright surgical lamps. He wanted to scream at them to see it, to point and demand an explanation, but the words caught in his throat. His career, his sanity, everything balanced on that one detail. And yet he knew deep down that mark mattered more than anything else happening in the room. He stepped back as two uniformed police officers entered, their radios crackling faintly at their shoulders. One was Sergeant Daniel Rowe, a man Michael knew only from brief professional encounters. The sergeant was broad, steady, with a face carved into permanent suspicion. His eyes darted across the scene, landing on Michael like a hawk. "You called us, doctor. What's going on?" Michael motioned toward the bed, his voice low but urgent. "That girl, she was declared dead. She was already on my table." He inhaled sharply, forcing the words out. "But she is alive, and there's something else, something you need to see." Sergeant Rowe stepped closer, his boots squeaking against the polished floor. He stared at the girl, his jaw tightening. "What are you saying?" Michael lowered his voice further, careful to avoid the ears of the nurses. "Lift the sheet, just below her navel." Rowe frowned, but he did it. His gloved hand pulled back the edge of the hospital gown, revealing the faint circle pressed into the girl's skin. His face went rigid. His brows knitted, his mouth set in a hard line. He let go of the sheet quickly, almost as if the sight burned him. "You've got to be kidding me," Rowe muttered. Michael leaned in. "You've seen it before." It was not a question, it was a truth pulled straight from Rowe's expression. The sergeant's lips tightened. He did not answer. Instead, he motioned to his partner. "Secure the perimeter, nobody in or out without clearance." The partner nodded, heading toward the door. Michael's voice rose, edged with desperation. "You know what this is, tell me." Rowe turned, his gaze sharp enough to cut. "Doctor, your job is to keep her alive. Ours is to figure out the rest." Michael wanted to argue, to demand the truth that had been hidden from him for over a decade. But the monitors beeped wildly, the girl's heart rate dipping again, and all he could do was grip the edge of the counter until his knuckles went white. The next hour stretched into eternity. The team fought relentlessly, pumping her fragile body with medication, stabilizing her breathing, adjusting machines to keep her alive by a thread. Michael remained rooted to the spot, every muscle taut, his chest aching with guilt and terror. Finally, the numbers steadied. Weak, unstable, but steady. A collective exhale filled the room. "She's hanging on," Alvarez said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "But she needs intensive care. She's not out of danger." Two nurses wheeled her toward the ICU, monitors and IV bags rattling with each bump. Michael followed, unable to stop himself, his eyes locked on the girl's still face. She was more than a patient now. She was a puzzle, a haunting, a living contradiction. As they pushed through the hallway, Sergeant Rowe walked beside him, his voice low and firm. "Doctor, you did the right thing calling us. But from here on, you need to understand, this case is bigger than either of us." Michael stared at him. "Bigger how? She's a child." Rowe's expression darkened. "Exactly, and children like this don't just appear in fields by lakes, not with marks like that." Michael felt his stomach turn. He gripped the railing of the stretcher as if to steady himself. "Children like this? What does that mean?" Rowe didn't answer. His eyes stayed forward, his jaw locked. The ICU doors swung open, and the girl was wheeled inside. Machines surrounded her in seconds, wires crisscrossing her body, monitors flashing green and red. A nurse adjusted her oxygen mask while another whispered into the phone, calling for a pediatric intensivist. Michael pressed his hand against the glass window, staring at her small chest rising and falling under the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator. His reflection stared back at him, a man shaken, broken, haunted. And in that moment, one thought lodged itself deep in his mind. Whoever had left her in that field had not intended for her to live. But she had. And now, the secret carved into her skin would drag him into a truth he had spent his entire career trying to avoid. The ICU lights flickered softly, their glow sterile and merciless. Machines beeped in steady rhythms, announcing the fragile thread of life tethering the little girl to this world. Dr. Michael Hale stood at the observation window, his reflection blurring over her small form as nurses moved in precise patterns around her bed. She looked impossibly fragile, her face pale against the white pillow, her hair fanned out in uneven strands. Every rise of her chest was orchestrated. By the ventilator, every heartbeat monitored by numbers glowing in green and red. But it was the mark, hidden beneath the hospital gown, that pressed itself against Michael's mind with suffocating weight. Sergeant Daniel Rowe leaned against the wall beside him, arms crossed. His eyes never left the girl either, but his silence screamed louder than any words. "You've seen that mark before," Michael said finally, his voice low, almost a whisper. Rowe's jaw clenched. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he scratched at the edge of his badge as though the weight of it bore down on him. "Doctor," he said slowly, "sometimes the truth isn't meant for every set of ears." Michael turned to face him, anger rising to combat the fear gnawing his insides. "She's not a case file. She's a child, and I almost cut into her body thinking she was dead. If you know what that mark means, then say it. Stop hiding behind half answers." Rowe finally looked at him. His eyes were tired, heavy with things unsaid. "All I can tell you is this: we've seen children before, not many, and they always disappear before questions can be answered. They're ghosts, Hale, ghosts with scars that don't belong to their age." Michael's skin prickled. "Disappear." "Taken, covered up. Whichever word you like better," Rowe muttered. Michael's mouth went dry. He wanted to demand more, but before he could, a nurse hurried out of the ICU, clutching a clipboard. "She's stable for now," the nurse said, "but she's critical. We need her in pediatric intensive care upstairs." Michael nodded numbly. Rowe's gaze remained fixed on the girl. As the nurses prepared the transfer, Michael's eyes flicked to her arm. Dirt still lingered beneath her fingernails, embedded deep as though she had been clawing at something, fighting. His chest tightened. Whoever she was, she hadn't simply collapsed in that field. She had struggled. The stretcher rolled out, wheels squeaking faintly on the linoleum. Michael followed, Rowe beside him like a shadow. They moved through the elevator doors, the silence inside heavier than the steel walls enclosing them. Finally, Rowe broke it. "Did you notice the envelope they brought with her?" Michael frowned. "The file." Rowe shook his head. "Not the police report. An envelope tucked under the sheet. One of my officers logged it." Michael's pulse quickened. What was inside? Rowe's gaze was flat. "That's the problem. It was empty." The words sank like a stone into Michael's gut. An envelope without contents. A gesture meant to mock or to warn. The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open to reveal the hushed hallway of the pediatric ward. Bright murals of cartoon animals covered the walls, a cruel contrast to the machines and monitors that awaited inside each room. As they wheeled the girl into her new room, Michael lingered at the threshold. He could not bring himself to leave, not yet. He leaned against the doorway, staring at her tiny body surrounded by wires, her chest still rising faintly under the ventilator's control. "Doctor," Rowe's voice pulled him back. Michael turned. The sergeant's eyes were grim. "You need to go home, rest. We'll keep this under watch." Michael shook his head. "You don't understand. If I leave, I won't sleep. That mark," he lowered his voice, leaning closer. "That mark is burned into my memory. I saw it on a boy when I was a resident. He didn't survive. They told me to forget it, to never mention it again." Rowe's gaze sharpened. "What was his name?" Michael hesitated. The boy's face flashed in his memory, pale skin, wide, frightened eyes, the same brand on his belly. He remembered the hush that followed, the way the file disappeared from records overnight. "I don't know. They erased him, just like they'll try to erase her." Rowe stared at him for a long moment, then spoke in a tone laced with reluctant respect. "Then you already know what we're up against." Michael exhaled, his hand tightening around the frame of the door. "I know enough to be terrified." For a moment, neither man spoke. The soft beep of monitors filled the air, a lullaby of survival in a place that felt more like a battlefield. Then from the girl's bed a sound, faint, fragile but unmistakable. Her lips moved. Michael stumbled forward, nearly colliding with the bed. The nurses froze. One leaned down, eyes wide. She tried to speak, the nurse whispered. Michael bent low, his ear hovering close to the girl's mouth. Her breath was shallow, rattling, but there it was again. A single word, cracked and broken, yet carried on the faintest wisp of air. "Help!" The room froze. Michael's throat burned. His hand trembled as he brushed a strand of hair from her damp forehead. "We will. I promise we will." But as he whispered the words, his eyes caught the mark again, just barely visible under the edge of her gown. And for the first time, he wondered if help was even possible, because whatever had been done to Thai's child was not the work of chance, but of design. Rowe pulled out his radio, his voice clipped. "This is Sergeant Rowe. I want a unit outside this door at all times. Nobody gets near this girl unless they're cleared by me." Static crackled back, followed by confirmation. Michael straightened, but his heart remained heavy, his mind racing through memories he had buried. This was no accident, no mistake. This was a message, and it had found its way back to him after all these years. He turned to Rowe, his voice hoarse. "She spoke. That means she can tell us what happened." Rowe's eyes were hard. "If she lives long enough." Michael looked back at her, the fragile rise and fall of her chest, the tubes and wires keeping her tethered to life. His stomach twisted. The truth was, he didn't know if she would. And if she didn't, then the mark was all they had left. A mark that carried a story someone wanted buried so deep, even death was not enough to silence it. The word "help" echoed in the sterile room long after the little girl's lips had gone still again. Nurses exchanged uneasy glances, their movements suddenly more careful, reverent even, as if they were no longer tending to a patient, but to a living miracle. Dr. Michael Hale remained bent over the bed, his hand resting gently on the railing. His pulse pounded in his ears. He had heard death rattle, the final gasps of those already gone. This was not that. This was speech, weak, broken, but undeniable. Sergeant Rowe stood at the doorway, his figure blocking the fluorescent hallway light. His eyes had narrowed, but not in disbelief. No, his face carried something heavier, something like recognition. "She spoke," Michael whispered, his throat tight. "That means she's conscious, even if only for moments." Rowe's voice was quiet but firm. "It means she remembers, and if she remembers, someone out there is already worried about what she might say." Michael turned sharply. "You think she's in danger even here, in a hospital?" Rowe's expression didn't change, especially here. He reached for his radio again. "Double the unit at the door, no visitors, no exceptions." The static reply crackled, confirming his order. Inside the room, one of the younger nurses gently adjusted the girl's IV line, her own face pale. "Doctor," she said softly, "her vitals are stabilizing for now, but she's weak. If she tries to speak again, it could take everything out of her." Michael nodded, his throat still raw. "Then we let her rest, and when she's strong enough, we listen." But as he said it, his eyes fell back to her belly. The mark seemed almost to shimmer under the edge of the gown, a pale circle like burned flesh. He forced himself to look away, but the image pressed deeper into his mind, as though it branded him too. He stepped back, scrubbing his face with his hand. He needed air, needed to think. Rowe followed him into the hallway. The pediatric ward was hushed, murals of painted elephants and giraffes staring down with frozen smiles that only made the place feel colder. Michael leaned against the wall, dragging in a shaky breath. "I have to know, Sergeant," he said at last. "That mark, it's not random. What is it?" Rowe's eyes darkened. He looked around to be sure no one else was close before he spoke. A long time ago, a task force uncovered cases across 3 states. Children found abandoned with that same scar. None of them survived long enough to explain, and every time the files went missing, buried, higher-ups claimed it was coincidence. He paused, jaw tightening, but we knew better. Michael felt his stomach drop. Why was I never told? I examined one of them myself during my residency. The boy had the exact same mark. Rowe's gaze hardened. Then you know why. Doctors ask questions, and questions make people nervous. Michael pressed his hands against his face. For years, he had buried that memory, convincing himself it had been a nightmare, an unsolvable mystery he could do nothing about. But now here it was again, alive, breathing, pleading for help. Before he could reply, a shrill alarm burst from the room behind them. Both men turned at once. Nurses rushed back to the bedside, voices overlapping, heart rate dropping, blood pressure unstable. Michael shoved past the doorframe, his chest seizing with panic. The girl's small body jerked faintly against the wires, her eyelids fluttering. The monitor screamed a flat, high-pitched warning. "Get epinephrine now," Michael barked. Hands moved fast, syringes drawn, tubes adjusted. He pressed his palm gently against her sternum, leaning close as if willing her to fight. "Stay with me, little one. Stay." A nurse injected the dose. The seconds that followed stretched into eternity. Then, finally, the green line spiked. A fragile rhythm returned. The room exhaled. Michael leaned heavily against the bedrail, his heart hammering. His gloves were slick with sweat. For a moment, he closed his eyes. And then something brushed against his wrist. He looked down sharply, her hand, small, fragile fingers twitching faintly against him. His breath caught, he bent closer. Her lips moved again, barely forming the shape of words. He leaned nearer until his ear hovered an inch from her mouth. This time it was help. It was a name. Anna. Michael's eyes widened. He pulled back slightly, his own voice a whisper. "Anna, is that your name?" But her eyes remained closed, her lips falling still. The monitors hummed their mechanical lullaby, indifferent. Ro had stepped closer, his voice low and taut. "She said a name." Michael nodded. "Anna, either hers or someone she wants us to find." Ro's eyes flickered with something unreadable. He turned quickly, pulling a small notepad from his pocket and scribbling the name. "That's the first lead we've had. Don't repeat it in front of anyone else." "Not yet." Michael stared at him, incredulous. "She's a child. She just gave us a piece of who she is, and you want me to keep it quiet." Ro's voice sharpened. "If you care about her, doctor, you'll keep it between us. Until I know who we're really up against, every ear in this hospital could be the wrong one." The words cut deeper than Michael wanted to admit. He looked back at the little girl Anna, if that was truly her name, her tiny body nearly swallowed by machines. His chest ached. She was fighting to exist, and already her truth was being hidden, just like the boy before her. He clenched his fists, swallowing hard. "I won't let her disappear, not again." Ro tucked the notepad back into his pocket, his face unreadable. "Then prepare yourself, because if she survives long enough to tell her story, someone will come looking to silence her." Michael felt the weight of those words settle, like lead in his gut. The rest of the night blurred into a haze of alarms, whispers, and shifting shadows in the hallway. He refused to leave her side, standing vigil as if his presence alone could keep her tethered to the world. Nurses came and went, machines beeped, and Ro's officers took posts at every door. But Michael's eyes never left her. Once, in the early hours of dawn, her fingers twitched again, curling faintly as though reaching for something unseen. He took her hand gently, his own voice breaking. "You're safe now. I promise you're safe." But deep down, even as he said it, he wasn't sure it was true. Because safety required answers. And the answers to this mystery were buried in scars, shadows, and a name whispered in the dark. Anna. Whoever she was, whatever she had endured, her story was not finished. And Michael knew, with terrible certainty, that neither was his. The name clung to Michael's thoughts like a burr, sharp and impossible to shake. Anna. He whispered it to himself more than once through the night, testing the weight of it on his tongue, as if saying it aloud might give the child more substance, more claim to her own existence. But dawn arrived without answers. Pale light filtered through the blinds of the pediatric ICU, painting stripes across her fragile frame. The night staff rotated out, replaced by fresh-eyed nurses who whispered updates while trying not to wake the other children in the ward. Michael hadn't moved from his post beside her bed. His shoulders ached, his eyes burned, but he refused to leave. She lay motionless, wires snaking across her body, monitors humming. Every beat of her heart was a reminder. She wasn't supposed to be here, yet she was. Ro entered quietly, his boots muted on the linoleum. A paper cup of coffee steamed in his hand. He set it down beside Michael without a word. "You're still here," the sergeant said, his tone neither surprise nor judgment. Michael rubbed at his eyes. "Where else would I be?" Roe sipped his own coffee, watching Anna through the glass. "The hospital is tightening access. Official story is she's a Jane Doe found near the lake. That's all anyone's allowed to know." Michael's jaw clenched. "And the truth?" Roe's eyes stayed forward. "The truth stays between us until I know who to trust." Michael wanted to argue, to demand the full story, but the beep of the monitor cut him off. Anna shifted faintly, her small hand curling against the sheet. Her lips parted, though no sound escaped. Michael leaned forward, instinct pulling him closer. "It's all right, Anna, you're safe." Her eyelids flickered, almost as if she heard him. Then, with effort, she exhaled a single syllable. Not her name this time, something else. "Cold." The word slipped out, fragile as smoke. Michael quickly pulled the blanket higher over her chest, his throat tight. But her lips trembled again, forming words too faint to catch. He leaned closer, nearly pressing his ear to her mouth. "Lake cold." Michael's stomach twisted. He looked sharply at Roe. "She remembers the water." Roe nodded slowly, but his eyes hardened. "If she was in the lake, then Somme. Eon put her there." Michael's hands shook as he brushed a strand of hair from Anna's damp forehead. She was speaking in fragments, but they were enough to paint a picture: fear, water, the cold darkness. And yet she had lived through it. Somehow. Roe pulled out his notepad again, jotting quickly. "Anna, lake cold, we start there." Michael's voice cracked. "You make it sound like an investigation. She's a child, not a witness stand." Roe's gaze snapped to him. "She's both, and the sooner you understand that, the better chance she has." Michael pressed his palms against the railing, torn between anger and fear. That morning, while nurses monitored Anna's fragile signs, Roe disappeared down the hallway, leaving Michael alone with his thoughts. But not for long. A nurse returned with a plastic bag, sealed and labeled. She handed it to Michael with a hushed voice. This was recovered from the field where she was found. Police didn't log it yet, but it was handed off to the hospital. Michael frowned, peeling the bag open carefully. Inside lay a fragment of cloth, torn, waterlogged, faintly stained. It looked like part of a dress, pale pink once, now dulled by mud. And embroidered near the seam, almost hidden by dirt, were 2 letters. AH. Michael's pulse quickened. He traced the embroidery with his gloved finger, his breath catching. Initials. The nurse hesitated. Should I give it to the police? Michael shook his head. Not yet, thank you. When she left, he held the fabric up to the light, his thoughts racing. Anna H., the name whispered in the dark, was no longer alone, it had an anchor. He looked at her again, her chest rising faintly against the ventilator. Anna H., he murmured, you have a name, you're real. But with that realization came another weight. If she had a name, she had a family. Someone had lost her, or someone had abandoned her. By late afternoon, Sergeant Rowe returned, his face shadowed by fatigue. Michael met him in the hallway, the bag of fabric in his hand. Look at this, Michael said, his voice urgent. It was found with her. Initials AH. Rowe's eyes flickered over the cloth, his jaw tightening. Where did you get it? A nurse brought it, said it wasn't logged. Rowe swore under his breath. Then someone's already trying to move evidence off the record. That's a problem. Michael's chest burned. She has a family, we have to find them. Rowe stuffed the cloth back into the bag, his movements sharp. We'll run the initials through missing persons, quietly. Michael grabbed his arm, desperation seeping into his voice. She's more than initials in a database. She said her name. She remembers the lake. She's fighting to tell us what happened. Rowe's eyes locked on his, unyielding. And if you push too hard, doctor, she won't get the chance. Do you understand? Whoever did this didn't want her found. They don't make mistakes like this. Michael let go, his hand trembling, but the fire inside him refused to die. That night, as the ward quieted and most of the lights dimmed, Michael sat again by Anna's side. He held the fabric in his pocket, its weight heavier than stone. He whispered her name softly, a promise in his voice. You are Anna H., you are not forgot. Her fingers twitched faintly against the blanket, and for a moment, he swore her lips curved in the smallest, weakest attempt at a smile. Michael's chest tightened. He leaned closer, whispering fiercely, "I don't care who tried to erase you, they won't win this time." But even as he said it, shadows moved in the hallway, and the officers outside shifted uneasily. Because the world beyond that hospital door already knew she was alive. And they would not stay silent for long. The hospital grew quieter as night bled across the city. The pediatric ward lights dimmed, leaving only soft glows above the doors and the faint blinking of monitors in each room. Most children slept, their small breaths filling the air with fragile peace. But room 214 was different. In that room, silence was heavy, charged, as if the walls themselves knew the girl inside was not just another patient. Dr. Michael Hale sat at the corner desk, the glow of his laptop painting his face in cold light. He had pulled hospital records, searching databases he was not technically authorized to access. His fingers tapped steadily, pulling every recent missing child report from the tri-state area. The initials AH guided his search, narrowing down lists of names. Dozens appeared: Annabelle Harper, Alice Hayes, Amelia Hunt, Anna Hargrove. But only one case tugged at him, its details chilling in their familiarity. Anna Hargrove, age 7, reported missing 3 weeks ago. Last seen leaving a school playground in a small town outside of Cedar Falls. His throat tightened. The report listed her as presumed abducted. Investigators found no witnesses, no suspects, only a discarded backpack near the edge of a wooded trail. The file closed with a single line. Case remains open, no leads. Michael leaned back in his chair, the name blurring against his vision. Anna Hargrove, a child declared missing. A child now lying behind a glass door, branded with a mark no parent should ever see. He dragged a shaky hand down his face. He needed to tell Roe, but as he reached for his phone, a faint sound pulled him upright. The beeping from Anna's room had changed. He shot up, heart pounding, rushing across the hallway. The officers at the door looked up, startled. "Her monitor's spiking," Michael snapped as he pushed inside. Anna thrashed faintly against the sheets, her body jerking as though trapped in a nightmare. The ventilator hissed in protest, her breaths ragged and shallow. Michael hurried to her side, gripping her hand. "It's all right, Anna, you're safe, you're safe." Her eyes fluttered, lids barely lifting. For a second, a sliver of blue showed beneath the lashes. Then her lips moved. The voice that escaped was barely audible, a broken whisper gasping through the mask. "They're here." Michael froze. "Who, Anna, who's here?" Her body stilled, her eyelids falling shut again, but the words lingered in the air like smoke. Before Michael could process it, a loud click echoed from the far end of the hallway. The officers outside stiffened, one reaching instinctively for his sidearm. The lights above flickered once. Michael's chest went tight. He glanced at the girl, then at the door. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. Sergeant Rowe appeared seconds later, his voice low and sharp. "What happened?" Michael pointed to Anna. "She woke up. She said they're here." And then he jerked his head toward the hallway. "You heard that sound." Rowe swore under his breath, radioing for backup. Static hissed, followed by a clipped reply confirming additional units en route. Michael gripped the bedrill, trying to calm his breathing. "She knows. Whoever left her by that lake, she remembers them." Rowe's jaw tightened. "Then they'll come to finish what they started." Even as he said it, one of the officers shouted from the hallway. "Movement in the stairwell." Rowe's radio crackled again, frantic voices overlapping. South entrance door was forced, alarm cut, unknown subjects inside the building. Michael's heart stopped. He looked at Anna, her fragile body rising and falling beneath the blanket. She was helpless, tethered to machines. "We have to move her," Michael said urgently. "If they know she's here, this ward isn't safe." Rowe grabbed his shoulder. "Moving her now could kill her." Michael's voice rose, raw with fear. "Leaving her here will kill her faster." The hallway erupted with noise, boots pounding, radios blaring, officers shouting positions. Somewhere below, a door slammed, then another. Whoever had come inside was moving with purpose. Rowe turned to one of his men. "Lock down this floor, nobody in or out, now." The officer nodded, rushing toward the stairwell. Michael looked back at Anna. Her fingers twitched faintly against the blanket, as though she felt the tension in the air. He bent low, his voice breaking. "I'm not letting them take you, Anna, not after everything." For a moment, he thought she stirred again, her lips parting beneath the mask. But no words came, only the steady, fragile hum of the machines keeping her alive. Roe re-entered, his face grim. "Doctor, listen to me. Whoever's here isn't just wandering. They cut alarms, they know exactly where to go." Michael's pulse hammered, then they're coming straight for her. Roe nodded once, the truth heavy in the gesture. "And we have to be ready." As he spoke, the fluorescent lights overhead flickered again. This time, they didn't come back on. Darkness swallowed the ward. Only the beeping of monitors remained, each pulse sounding louder, faster, as shadows crept closer. Darkness fell across the pediatric ward like a curtain. The sudden loss of fluorescent light silenced even the nurses, leaving only the frantic beep of heart monitors and the hiss of oxygen machines to cut the black. For an instant, no one moved. Fear held them still. Then Sergeant Rowe's voice cracked through the silence. "Flashlights now." Beams of light cut through the dark as officers raised their weapons, red laser sights crossing against the walls. Shadows danced across painted animals on the hallway murals, turning smiling giraffes into distorted monsters. Michael's heart pounded as he grabbed the small emergency lamp from the supply cart, setting it near Anna's bed. The pale circle of light washed over her fragile frame, illuminating her still chest and the wires that tethered her to life. She looked even smaller, more vulnerable, in the shadows pressing close around her. Rowe's radio crackled. "Stairwell team, report." Static, then a burst of shouting. 2 suspects armed, moving up the south stairs, requesting backup. Gunfire rattled faintly below, muffle. But unmistakable. Michael froze, gunfire in a hospital for a child. Rowe swore under his breath, his grip tightening around his weapon. He motioned 2 officers to the door. "Hold this entrance. Nobody gets through." Michael leaned over Anna, whispering fiercely, "Stay with me, Anna, please." Her eyelids fluttered at the sound of his voice. Her lips moved beneath the oxygen mask, forming a shape too faint to hear. He bent closer, straining, desperate. One word reached him. "Run." Michael's throat closed. She knew. Even through the haze of medication, even half-conscious, she knew what was coming. The pounding of boots echoed up the stairwell. Louder, closer. Each thud reverberated in Michael's chest. The officers at the doorway raised their weapons, steady, calm, waiting for shadows to emerge. Rowe turned sharply. "Doctor, get back, stay low." But Michael couldn't move. His hands gripped the rail of Anna's bed as though letting go would condemn her. He looked down at her face, pale and fragile, and something inside him snapped. He wasn't just her doctor anymore. He was her last defense. The stairwell door burst open with a metallic slam. Figures spilled into the hallway, dark clothing, masks, moving with trained precision. Flashlights swept the walls. Weapons glinted in their hands. "Contact," an officer shouted, and gunfire exploded in the confined space. The sound was deafening. The walls shook with each blast, the mural animals shredded by stray bullets. Nurses screamed, ducking low behind counters. Michael threw himself over Anna's bed, shielding her small body with his own. The emergency lamp flickered, casting frantic shadows across the room. Rowe barked orders, his voice booming above the chaos. "Hold them, do not let them through." The intruders advanced, their movements chillingly coordinated. They weren't here for chaos. They weren't here for theft. They were here for one thing, one child. Michael pressed his forehead against the railing, his heart hammering. Anna's weak breath fogged the oxygen mask. Her fingers twitched, brushing against his sleeve. He whispered, his voice breaking, "I won't let them take you, I swear it." The fight outside raged on. Bullets ricocheted against steel. Officers shouted. Rowe fired, his jaw set in grim determination. Then Michael's eyes caught something in the dark. One of the intruders broke from the group, slipping through the chaos, moving low along the opposite wall. His mask caught the faint beam of light, his eyes locked on the ICU room, on Anna. Michael's chest seized. "Rowe, they're flanking." But the sergeant was pinned in the firefight, forced to hold his line. The masked figure was already at the threshold, raising a weapon. Michael had no weapon, no training, only instinct. He lunged forward, grabbing the metal IV pole from the corner and swinging it with everything he had. The pole cracked against the intruder's arm, the gun clattering to the floor. The man staggered but didn't fall, shoving Michael back with brutal force. Michael hit the counter hard, pain exploding across his ribs. He gasped, vision blurring, but forced himself up. The intruder reached for Anna, his gloved hand gripping the edge of her blanket. "No," Michael roared. He hurled himself forward, tackling the figure into the wall. They struggled, the intruder stronger, trained, but Michael fought with desperation born of terror. Fists, elbows, anything he had, he struck wildly, refusing to let go. The man slammed Michael against the steel cabinets, his hand reaching again toward the bed. But before he could touch her, a deafening shot cracked through the air. The intruder collapsed, blood blooming across his shoulder. Roe stood in the doorway, his weapon smoking, his eyes blazing. "I told you nobody touches her." The firefight outside faltered as sirens wailed in the distance. Reinforcements. The intruders retreated, dragging their injured comrade through the stairwell. The door slammed shut, the echoes fading. Silence fell, broken only by the beeping of monitors and the ragged breaths of those left standing. Michael staggered, clutching his ribs, his chest heaving. He turned immediately to Anna. She lay still, her face pale, her chest rising faintly beneath the mask. He pressed his hand to hers, trembling. "You're safe. They didn't take you. You're safe." Roe stepped inside, holstering his weapon, his expression carved from stone. That was no random attack. They came for her, and they'll come again. Michael looked at him, fury burning in his chest. "Then we move her. We take her somewhere they can't reach." Roe shook his head. "There's nowhere safe if they've already found her here. Whoever this is, they have reach, resources, power." Michael's voice rose, raw. "She's a child. She whispered for help. She gave us her name. You can't just keep her hidden in shadows until they finish what they started." Roe's eyes narrowed. "You think I dawn?" "T know that? I just watched men storm a hospital ward for a 7-year-old. I've seen plenty in 20 years, doctor, but nothing like this." Michael looked down at Anna, her hand still curled weakly against his. His voice softened, breaking. "Then we fight for her, because if we don't, no one else will." Roe said nothing, but the silence carried its own grim agreement. In the hallway, officers dragged the bodies of the injured. Nurses whispered frantically into phones. The smell of gunpowder lingered, acrid and heavy, clinging to the walls. But inside the small pool of emergency light, Michael held Anna's hand, his heart still hammering, his body still shaking. She was alive, barely, but alive. And the war for her survival had only just begun. The smell of gunpowder lingered long after the last echo of gunfire faded. Nurses crept back into the ward with wide eyes, their hands trembling as they checked equipment and steadied the younger patients who had woken crying. Shadows still clung to the corners, the emergency lights throwing everything into a surreal haze. Dr. Michael Hale refused to leave Anna's side. His ribs throbbed where the intruder had slammed him into the cabinets, but he hardly noticed. His hand remained wrapped around hers, grounding himself to the faint warmth of her skin. Sergeant Roe stood in the doorway, his face carved into sharp lines of exhaustion and fury. Officers swept the hallway behind him, their radios crackling with updates. "South stairwell clear. Suspects fled the premises. No civilian casualties." But Michael knew better. The damage was not only physical. Every soul in this wing had seen armed men breach a children's ward, and all of it for one girl. Roe's voice broke through the static. "Doctor, we're moving her to a secure wing. Reinforcements are en route. The state police will take over the perimeter." Michael shook his head, his grip tightening on Anna's hand. "She's too unstable to move again. You saw what happened when we tried before. Another shock to her system could kill her." Roe stepped closer, his boots heavy on the tile. "If they know she's here, keeping her in this ward is a death sentence." Michael's chest heaved. "So we choose between her body failing on the move or strangers breaking through that door again? Is that what you're telling me?" Roe's silence was answer enough. Before Michael could argue further, the monitor beside the bed shrieked. Anna's heart rate spiked, the green line jagging wildly. Her tiny chest heaved beneath the ventilator, her breaths shallow and frantic. Nurses rushed in, one fumbling with medication while another adjusted the mask. "Doctor," her pressures plummeting. Michael shoved himself upright, ignoring the pain lancing his ribs. "Give me atropine now." The nurse thrust the syringe into his hand. He injected it quickly, his eyes locked on the fragile rhythm flashing across the screen. "Come on, Anna, stay with me." Her body jerked faintly. The monitor flatlined for one horrible second. Then a beat, another. The jagged green rhythm returned, shaky but present. Michael sagged against the rail, sweat slicking his brow. His vision blurred with tears he hadn't realized were falling. "That's it. Fight, Anna, fight." Rose's jaw tightened as he watched. He said nothing, but the weight of his stare pressed against Michael's back. When the crisis passed, Michael slumped into the chair beside the bed, his hands trembling. Every time she crashed, she returned weaker. How long could she fight before her body gave up? Hours bled together. Reinforcements arrived. The hallway filled with state police and plainclothes agents whose badges flashed but whose eyes gave nothing away. They spoke in clipped tones, avoiding Michael's questions, treating Anna like a piece of evidence instead of a child. It enraged him. He waited until Rose stepped aside to make a call, then slipped into the staff lounge down the hall. His laptop waited there, still open to the missing children's database. He scrolled back to Anna Hargrove's file, his eyes devouring every line. 7 years old, blue eyes, brown hair, missing from Cedar Falls, presumed abducted. A chill passed through him. If her parents had filed the report, then somewhere, 2 people were out there, waiting, grieving, hoping. Did they know she was alive? Did they know she was lying in a hospital bed with strangers fighting to keep her heart beating? Michael dug deeper, pulling the original police report. The details were sparse, but one line stood out. Witness reported seeing a dark van parked near the school playground the day Anna vanished. His stomach twisted. A van, organized, deliberate. He pressed on, accessing the file of the boy he had examined during his residency years ago. That case had been scrubbed from most systems, but he had never forgotten the name, Caleb. With effort, he pulled fragments of archived data. Caleb, also 7 years old, reported. Missing near Cedar Falls almost 10 years prior. Found unresponsive, bearing the same circular scar. File sealed under federal order. Michael's hands shook as he compared the two. Same age, same mark, same region, a decade apart. This wasn't random. A sound at the door jolted him. Rose stepped inside, his eyes narrowing when he saw the files on the screen. "You're digging," Rose said flatly. Michael spun the laptop toward him. "Look at this. Caleb 10 years ago, Anna now, same place, same age, same scar. Tell me this is coincidence." Rose's face darkened, his silence speaking volumes. Michael's voice rose, desperate. "What are they doing to these children? What does that mark mean?" Rose shut the laptop with a snap, his gaze hard. "Stop asking questions you can't unhear the answers to." Michael stood, anger boiling in his chest. "I'm already in this, whether I like it or not. I held her when she flatlined. I heard her whisper for help. I can't just step back." Rose's jaw clenched. Finally, he spoke in a low voice. "There are people out there, Doctor, who collect secrets the way others collect currency. And sometimes those secrets are carved into the flesh of children. You want the truth? You won't like what you find." Michael swallowed hard, his chest heavy. "Then I'll hate it, but I'll still find it." Rose studied him for a long moment, then exhaled sharply. "You're going to get yourself killed." Michael's voice was steady now, burning with resolve. "Then I'll die fighting for her." A voice called from down the hall. "Dr. Hale, come quickly." Both men rushed back to Anna's room. She was awake. Her eyes, blue, wide, glassy, blinked against the dim light. Her lips moved beneath the mask, forming words. Michael leaned close, his heart hammering. "It's all right, Anna, I'm here." Her tiny hand lifted weakly, trembling as it touched the mark on her belly. And with a broken, fragile breath, she whispered something that froze the blood in his veins. "They made us." Michael's vision swam, his knees nearly buckled. He grasped the bedrail, his heart racing. "Us? Anna, what do you mean?" But her eyes fluttered shut again, the effort too much. The monitor steadied, her body sinking back into fragile sleep. Michael's breath came in ragged bursts, his mind spun. "Us? She wasn't alone." Somewhere out there, others like her existed. Children marked, abandoned, hunted. And if she had survived, perhaps they had too. Roe's face was pale, his eyes dark with the weight of unspoken truth. He didn't need to say it aloud, Michael already knew. This wasn't just about Anna anymore. It never had been. The words clung to Michael's mind long after Anna slipped back into unconsciousness. They made us. Not me, not singular, us. He sat by her bed, staring at her small hand where it still rested faintly against her stomach, over the scar that had changed everything. He wanted to shake the meaning from the walls, to tear the truth out of the silence that suffocated this hospital. But no answer came. Only the steady beep of monitors, keeping time with a heart that should not have been beating at all. Roe lingered in the corner, his face shadowed in the pale glow. For the first time since the girl had been brought in, his hardened exterior cracked just enough to reveal unease. He rubbed the back of his neck, then spoke in a low voice. "You heard her." Michael's head snapped up. "Of course I heard her. How could I not? She said they made us." His voice rose, sharp with panic. "What does that mean, Roe? Who's they? What is this?" Roe's jaw clenched. He stared at the floor for a long moment before answering. There were whispers, not official files, not something you could ever find on record. Stories passed between investigators, caseworkers who'd seen too much. His eyes lifted, grim and heavy. Children disappearing, reappearing with scars, not random, not accidents, selected. Michael's stomach churned. Selected for what? Roe's silence stretched. His eyes flicked toward Anna, then back. Experiments. The word cut Michael to the bone. He nearly staggered back. "You can't be serious. She's a little girl. These are children, not." Roe's voice was hard. "I told you, you don't want these answers." Michael's throat tightened. "And yet here we are. She's alive. She's telling us herself. You want me to pretend she didn't just say that?" Roe sighed, rubbing his temples as though the weight of years pressed down on him. "There's an old rumor about a program. Not government, at least not officially. A shadow network. They take children, no one knows how many. The mark, it's not just branding, it's a signature, ownership." Michael's chest burned, his fists clenched at his sides. "Ownership? She's not property, she's a human being." Roe's eyes hardened. "Tell that to the people who put that mark on her." Michael turned away, gripping the edge of the bed so tightly his knuckles went white. He oaked down at Anna, her fragile chest rising against the ventilator. The thought of her being owned, of her being used, rage and grief twisted together inside him until he could hardly breathe. At that moment, the door creaked open, and a nurse entered with fresh supplies. But Michael noticed something immediately. Her badge. It was upside down. Every nurse wore theirs upright, clipped carefully to their scrubs. But this one hung wrong, the photo hidden against the fabric. Michael's pulse spiked. "Roe," he hissed under his breath. Roe followed his gaze instantly. His hand slid toward his sidearm, casual, controlled. The nurse set the tray down, her hand steady. Too steady. She didn't glance at the monitors, didn't greet Anna like the others always did. Instead, her eyes flicked once to the scar beneath the girl's gown. Michael moved before he thought, stepping between the bed and the nurse. "What are you doing?" Her smile was thin, wrong, checking on the patient. Roe drew his weapon in one swift motion. "Step back now." The nurse's expression didn't change. She raised her hand slowly, but her eyes glittered with something cold. "You think you can keep her here forever," she said softly. "You're already too late." Michael's chest clenched. "What do you mean?" The nurse's lips curved. She wasn't the only one who made it out. Before Roe could press further, she lunged. Not at him, but at the syringe in her tray. Michael shoved her hard, the syringe clattering to the floor before she could grab it. Officers burst in seconds later, wrestling her down. She struggled with unnatural strength, her eyes wild, before they finally pinned her and dragged her away. Michael's hands shook as he picked up the syringe, sealed and capped but unmistakable. A label marked only with a number. No drug name, no instructions. Roe took it from him, his jaw tight. She wasn't a nurse. Michael's voice was hoarse. She wanted to finish what the others couldn't. They both turned back to Anna. She hadn't stirred during the commotion, her fragile body still tethered to life by machines. Michael's throat ached as he whispered, "She said us. How many more children are out there, Roe? How many?" Ro's face was grim, more than we'll ever want to believe. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the city, growing louder, then fading again. But inside the ward, the sound of monitors filled the silence, keeping time with the single fragile heartbeat of the girl they had nearly lost again. Michael sank into the chair, his voice breaking. If she wasn't the only one, then this isn't just about saving her. It's about stopping whoever's doing this before they take another. Ro placed a heavy hand on his shoulder, his voice low but cert. Then you'd better be ready, doctor, because if we start pulling at this thread, the whole world might unravel. Michael looked back at Anna, her face pale and still against the pillow. He thought of the boy from years ago. He thought of the mark. He thought of her whisper, "They made us." And for the first time, he realized the truth he had been avoiding since the moment he found her still alive on his table. This wasn't just an autopsy gone wrong. This was a war. The ward had never felt colder. The false nurse was gone, dragged away by officers whose faces betrayed just how shaken they were, but her words lingered like poison in the air. "You're already too late." She wasn't the only one who made it out. Michael sat hunched over at Anna's bedside, his head in his hands. He could still see the way that woman's eyes had locked on the scar, the syringe gleaming in her palm. If he had hesitated for even one more second, Anna's fight would have ended right there. Ro stood by the door, his arms crossed, scanning every shadow, every movement in the hall. He hadn't spoken since the nurse was dragged away. His jaw was tight, his gaze sharp, like a man waiting for the next attack he knew was coming. Finally, Michael broke the silence. His voice was rough, almost bitter. "They're everywhere, aren't they? Whoever they are. They can walk in here with a badge and a tray of supplies, and no one questions it." Ro's eyes flicked toward him. "That's the point. They blend, they infiltrate. By the time you realize what they are, it's already too late." Michael lifted his head, his eyes red from exhaustion. But Anna realized. "She survived, she told us." His voice cracked. "She gave us a chance." Ro studied him for a long moment, then moved closer, lowering his voice. "Doctor, you wanted answers. You've got the beginnings of them, but now you have a choice. You can go back to being a surgeon, to treating the sick and burying the dead, and leave this to people who have already buried themselves in it. Or..." Michael cut him off, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Or I can fight with you." Ro's expression didn't change, but his silence was a kind of acceptance. There could say more. Anna stirred. The monitor beeped faster, her fragile body twitching against the wires. Michael was instantly at her side, holding her hand, murmuring softly, "It's all right, Anna, you're safe." Her eyelids fluttered. Blue eyes opened, unfocused at first, then locking on his face. Her lips moved, faint but determined. "Don't let them take me." Michael's throat tightened, he leaned close. "I won't, I promise." Her eyes closed again, but her fingers curled faintly around his. Michael stayed like that for a long while, gripping her hand, feeling the fragility of her life beneath his palm. When she was quiet again, he turned back to Ro, his voice hardening. "We need to know what she's up against. Who took her? Why?" Ro nodded once. "Then we start where it all began, Cedar Falls. That's where she vanished. That's where the boy before her vanished. It's not coincidence, it's a hunting ground." Michael frowned. "You think they're choosing from the same place over years?" Ro's eyes darkened. Predators returned to familiar woods. Michael's stomach twisted. The idea of Anna being stalked, of others like her being marked, was almost too much to bear. But he forced himself to stand, pulling his laptop closer. "Then we dig." Together, they combed through missing persons reports, medical records, archived news clippings. The deeper they went, the clearer the pattern became. Every few years, a child vanished from the Cedar Falls region. Always young, always around the same age, always with no resolution. Michael's blood ran cold as he counted. One every 3 years, a grim cadence. And Anna was the latest verse in a song of horror that stretched back decades. Ro tapped the screen. "Look at the dates. The gaps aren't random, they're scheduled. Someone's running a timetable." Michael shook his head, horrified. "Scheduled, like appointments." Ro's voice was low, "Like experiments." The word made Michael's chest burn. He thought of Anna whispering, "They made us," of her fragile hand touching her scar. These weren't random children. they were subjects. Before he could respond, alarms blared from the monitors again. Michael spun back to the bed. Anna's vitals plunged, her heart rate falling like a stone. Nurses rushed in, panic written across their faces. "Doctor, she's seizing." Michael was already at her side, shouting orders. "Diazepam stat." Her small body convulsed, her lips foaming, the ventilator hissing against her desperate gasps. Michael injected the drug, his hand steady though his soul was unraveling. "Come on, Anna, stay with me, please." Rose stood frozen in the corner, watching, helpless, as Michael fought for her life. Finally, the seizure eased. Her body stilled, limp against the mattress. The monitor beeped again, slower, steadier. Michael sagged against the rail, sweat running down his neck, his vision blurred with tears. "She's too weak. Every time she slips, it takes more out of her." A nurse wiped her brow, whispering, "I don't know how much longer she can keep fighting." Michael turned, his eyes blazing. "She'll keep fighting as long as I do. Do you understand me?" The nurse nodded quickly, retreating. Roe approached slowly, his voice heavy. "She's not just fighting her body, she's fighting them. Every second she lives, she defies them." Michael gripped Anna's hand again, his jaw set. "Then she won't be alone in that fight." Roe studied him, then finally said, "If you mean that, doctor, we need to leave this hospital. Tonight, if they've breached it once, they'll do it again. And next time, they won't send one imposter nurse. They'll send an army." Michael's heart thundered. The thought of moving her now, so fragile, was terrifying. But Roe was right. This hospital was no fortress. He looked down at Anna, at the faint rise and fall of her chest. She had survived drowning. She had survived an attack. She had survived being left for dead. And still she whispered for help. Michael straightened, his decision burning clear in his chest. "Then we move her, but not just anywhere. Somewhere they'll never expect." Roe's eyebrow lifted. "And where's that?" Michael's voice was fierce. "Back to Cedar Falls, to where it started. If we want answers, we stop running from that town and face it head-on." Roe stared at him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then pack your things. By dawn, we leave." Michael looked down at Anna one more time. Her hand twitched faintly in his, as though she had heard. And for the first time since he found her on his table, he thought he saw it. Not just fragility, not just pain, but something else flickering deep behind her closed eyelids. Resolve. The hospital halls were quiet by dawn, but it was not the peaceful kind of quiet that came with a night's end. It was the strained silence of a place holding its breath, waiting for another storm. Officers lingered at every corner, their shoulders taut, eyes scanning Eve. Wry flicker of movement, nurses whispered instead of speaking. Families clutched their children closer. But in room 214, the storm was already being prepared for. Michael zipped a medical duffel shut, every movement clipped and tense. The bag was packed with what Anna would need: oxygen canisters, spare tubing, medications, syringes. His mind replayed the steps a dozen times, each mistake he imagined tightening the knot in his chest. Roe checked his sidearm again, then the second weapon holstered at his ankle. His eyes never left the window. The first light of dawn crept across the city outside, painting the buildings in cold gray. "She won't survive another attack here," he said finally. Michael looked at Anna, her small form pale against the sheets. Her chest rose faintly with the ventilator's hiss. He smoothed her hair back, his throat tight. "She won't survive a move either." Roe's gaze shifted to him. "Then we make sure she does." Michael hesitated, then gave a sharp nod. There was no alternative. Together, they lifted her onto a mobile stretcher. Michael adjusted the straps with trembling hands, his jaw tight. The wheels squeaked softly as they rolled her toward the service elevator. Every sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty corridor. Two officers flanked them, silent and grim. Roe led the way, his hand resting near his weapon. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing them inside the dimly lit box. The descent felt endless, each floor ding a drumbeat in Michael's chest. He kept his eyes on Anna, whispering softly, "You're going to be all right, just hold on." When the doors opened, they rolled out into the underground garage. Shadows stretched across concrete pillars, the smell of oil and exhaust thick in the air. A black unmarked van waited, engine running low. Roe motioned sharply, Load her in." Michael and the officers lifted her gently, securing the stretcher inside. The van's interior was cold, sterile, more like a field unit than a vehicle. Oxygen tanks, straps, reinforced walls. It was ready for this. Too ready. As Michael adjusted her mask, a faint sound escaped her lips. Cold. His throat tightened, he brushed her hand. "I know, Anna, but we'll keep you warm this time, I promise." Rose slid the door shut, climbing into the passenger seat. Michael stayed in the back, gripping the rail beside Anna, never letting go of her hand. The van pulled out, tires crunching against gravel. The city streets passed in a blur, then gave way to long stretches of empty highway. Dawn spread across the horizon, pale gold bleeding into gray clouds. For a time, there was only the hum of the engine, the steady beep of the monitor, and the soft hiss of oxygen. Michael leaned close to her ear. "We're going back to where it started, Cedar Falls. Maybe there we'll find the truth." Her fingers twitched faintly around his, as though she heard. Rose's voice carried from the front. "We keep the route off-grid. No main highways, no predictable stops. If they're tracking us, they won't have an easy time." Michael frowned. "And if they're already following?" Roe didn't answer. He didn't have to. Hours passed. Fields stretched wide on either side of the road, dotted with barns and faded houses. Michael tried to focus on Anna to block out the fear gnawing at him. But every car that appeared in the mirrors, every shadow on the horizon, twisted his stomach tighter. By late morning, the clouds had thickened. Rain pattered against the windshield, turning the world into a smear of gray. The wipers thumped steadily, a grim metronome. Michael checked Anna's vitals again. Her pressure was low, too low. He adjusted the oxygen flow, his hands steady though his insides trembled. "Stay with me, Anna, just a little longer." Then he saw it. A pair of headlights in the distance, growing closer, too steady. Michael's chest tightened. "Roe." Roe glanced at the side mirror, his jaw clenched. "They've been behind us for 15 miles. Michael's pulse spiked. "Are you sure it's them?" Rose's voice was flat. "I'm sure." The headlights edged closer, the shape of a dark SUV emerging through the rain. Its windows were tinted, its movements deliberate, matching their speed perfectly. Rose's hand slid to the weapon holstered at his chest. "Hold on." The van surged forward, the engine roaring. The SUV matched it, closing the gap. Rain streaked the glass, the wipers working furiously, but Michael could see the shadow of figures inside. "Michael," Rose shouted, "keep her stable." Michael braced himself as the van swerved sharply. He shielded Anna with his body, his hands gripping the stretcher's rails. The monitor beeped wildly, her vitals spiking with the jolt. "Easy, Anna, easy. I've got you," Michael whispered, though his own voice shook. The SUV rammed the rear bumper. The van jolted violently, tires screeching against wet pavement. Roe shouted to the driver, "Lose them." The van veered off the En road, tearing down a side path flanked by dense woods. Mud splattered across the windows, branches scraping the sides. The SUV followed, relentless. Michael's heart pounded. The stretcher rattled, the monitor alarms blaring. He pressed one hand to Anna's chest, steadying her as best he could. "Hold on, Anna, just a little longer." The SUV surged again, slamming into the side of the van. Metal shrieked. Michael nearly lost his footing, his ribs screaming in pain. Roe fired out the passenger window, bullets sparking against the SUV's hood. The vehicle swerved but didn't stop. "They're not backing off," Roe shouted. The van barreled deeper into the woods, tires skidding through mud, tree branches whipping across the windshield. Michael held Anna tight, his entire body shielding her. Another slam, the van lurched sideways, nearly tipping. Michael felt the stretcher shift beneath him. His stomach turned to ice. Then sudden silence. The SUV pulled back, slowing. For one strange, haunting moment, it simply followed at a distance. Roe's eyes narrowed. "They're waiting." Michael's voice cracked. "Waiting for what?" Before Roe could answer, the SUV's headlights cut sharply to the side, vanishing down a different path. The van screeched to a stop in the middle of the muddy road. Rain hammered the roof, thunder rolling in the distance. Michael sagged against the stretcher, gasping for breath. Anna's vitals were weak but steady. Roe reloaded his weapon, his eyes scanning the trees. They're not gone, they're circling. Michael's stomach churned. He looked down at Anna, pale and fragile beneath the harsh glow of the interior lights. His voice broke as he whispered to her, "They won't stop, will they?" Ro's silence was all the answer he needed. The storm outside deepened, the woods pressing close. Somewhere out there, engines idled, waiting. And Michael realized with chilling certainty, the road to Cedar Falls was not just leading them to answers. It was leading them straight into the jaws of the people who had made her. The rain never stopped. By the time the van reached Cedar Falls, the storm had swallowed the town whole. The streets were slick and empty, the windows of the small houses glowing faintly like watchful eyes. It was the kind of place where the past clung to every brick, every street lamp, every rusting fence. Michael sat hunched in the back, gripping Anna's frail hand. She had grown quieter, her breath shallow, her skin pale against the dim glow of the monitor. Each bump in the road made the alarms flicker, his chest seizing with fear. She was slipping, and he knew it. If they did not find help or answers, soon there would be no more time. Ro guided the driver with curt directions. Take the back roads, stay off Main Street, too exposed. His eyes never stopped scanning, flicking to every car, every shadow that passed. The van turned down an old gravel road lined with trees that leaned heavy in the rain. Ahead, a squat brick building rose from the earth, its windows boarded, its roof sagging. The faded sign above the door was still just barely visible, Cedar Falls Children's Clinic. Michael's stomach turned. This place. Ro's voice was grim. Shut down 15 years ago, officially it was condemned, but I've heard whispers it was used after that. Quietly, off the books. Michael's chest burned as he stared at the building. The thought of children, Anna, Caleb, others, brought here under the guise of safety made his fists clench. The van pulled to a stop. The storm hammered the roof, thunder growling low across the sky. Ro turned sharply to Michael. We don't know what's inside, but if we're going to understand what she meant, what they did to her, it starts here. Michael nodded, his throat dry. He looked down at Anna. Her eyes fluttered open faintly, glassy, unfocused. She whispered a word so soft he almost missed it. Home. Michael froze. This place, Anna, is this where they took you? Her lips trembled, but no more words came. Her eyelids closed again. Michael's chest tightened. He brushed a hand across her hair. We'll finish this for you. Ro and the officers moved first, weapons raised as they approached the clinic. The front doors creaked on their hinges, opening into darkness. The smell of mildew and rust filled the air, heavy and suffocating. Michael followed close behind, his flashlight beam cutting across peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, medical charts scattered like leaves. The silence inside was thicker than the storm outside. They moved down a hallway lined with faded murals of smiling children holding balloons. The paint had cracked and peeled, the eyes hollow in the beam of light. Michael's stomach churned. This was supposed to be a place that healed children. Ro's voice was low. It was never that. They reached a door at the end of the hall, heavier than the others, reinforced with steel. Ro nodded to the officers, with a GR. They forced it open, the lock snapping. The smell hit them first, stale, chemical, old. The room beyond was no clinic, it was a lab. Rows of metal tables lined the walls, restraints still bolted to their sides. Cabinets of vials, syringes, and files stood gathering dust. Old machines hummed faintly, impossibly still connected to some hidden source of power. Michael's breath caught. He stepped forward, shining his light across the tables. His chest ached at the sight of small handprints worn into the steel, scratched as though children had once tried to claw their way free. On the far wall, binders lined a shelf, their spines marked only with numbers. Michael pulled one free, his hands shaking. He opened it and froze. Inside were photographs. Children, each one marked with the same scar Anna bore. Faces blurred by fear, some smiling faintly as if coaxed, others hollow with terror. Notes scrawled in neat handwriting beside them: subject viability, response to procedure, survival time. Michael's vision blurred with rage. His voice shook as he whispered, "They cataloged them, like they weren't even human." Ro's face was carved from stone, his jaw clenched so hard the muscles jumped. Subjects, that's all they ever were to whoever did this. Michael flipped the pages frantically. More faces, more scars, more dates. He froze on one photo. Caleb, the boy he had seen years ago, lying lifeless in his morgue. The same scar, the same hollow eyes. Michael's knees nearly gave. He was real, all of it. Rose's eyes darkened, and he wasn't the only one. Michael turned the pages until he found another photo. His heart stopped. Anna. Her photo stared back at him, younger, smaller, but unmistakably her. Notes scribbled, subject A7, current trial incomplete, status, escaped. His hands shook so violently the pages rattled. Escaped, she wasn't just abandoned. She ran, she got out. Rose's eyes flicked toward the doorway, his voice sharp. Which means they're hunting her not because she's their lost subject, but because she's their proof. Michael's chest burned. Proof of what? A voice answered from the shadows. That we can make life out of deaths. Both men spun, weapons raised. A figure stepped into the dim light. An older man in a lab coat, his hair white, his face lined with years but his eyes sharp and cold. He smiled faintly, as if greeting old friends. You found my work, he said smoothly. Few ever do. Michael's heart thundered. You did this, to her, to all of them. The man tilted his head. I gave them what nature never could. They were chosen for resilience, for potential. The mark is my signature, yes, but it is also their gift. They are mine. Michael's fists clenched. They are children, they are not yours, they are not experiments. The man's smile widened. And yet here she is, alive when she should not be. You were about to carve her open, were you not, doctor? Tell me, would you rather she had remained dead? Michael's vision swam with fury. He wanted to lunge at the man, to end him right there, but Rose's voice cut through the haze, sharp and low. Not now. The man's eyes glittered. Take her back if you wish, protect her if you can, but understand this, you have only one of many. There are more scattered, hidden, and every one of them carries my mark. My legacy, you cannot erase it. With that, he slipped back into the shadows, his footsteps echoing through a hidden passage before anyone could move. Rose cursed, chasing, but the path was already sealed. Michael stood frozen, his chest heaving, the binder clutched in his hands. He looked down at Anna's photo, then back at her fragile form on the stretcher. His voice broke. You are not his legacy. You are you. Rose returned, grim and breathless. He's gone for now. Michael nodded faintly, his jaw tight. He looked at Anna, whispering fiercely. You survived him once. You'll survive him again, I swear it. The storm raged outside, thunder shaking the walls of the old clinic. But inside, in the circle of flashlight beams and the fragile beep of one child's heartbeat, a new resolve burned. Michael no longer cared if it cost him his career, his safety, even his life. He would not rest until every child stolen by that man, every child marked, was found. And Anna, the girl who had risen from his table, would never be alone again. If you found yourself on the edge of your seat and want more stories that will keep your heart racing, make sure you hit subscribe, tap the like button, and stay tuned. Your next chilling mystery is just ahead.